Persona 5 Royal has a total of 23 different Arcanas, and I will try to beat the entire game using only a single one of them per playthrough. Welcome to the very first video of the Persona 5 Arcana Challenge. For the first video of this challenge, I have chosen the Chariot Arcana as it is the first one to unlock and probably one of the easier ones all things considered. But before I go into further details, let's quickly check the rules so all of you get a little bit of a better idea on what this is all about. First of all, obviously, we're only going to be allowed to use Chariot personas. This includes not only battles, but also during fusion, the electric chair, gallows, or even during a hold-up when it comes to persona or item negotiation. The exception to this are treasure demons, as they are solely used to rank a persona of a specific arcana, either a rank up or down, but more on that when we get there. The only other party member allowed is the one of the Specified Arcana, which in the case of the Chariot is Ryuji. If there is no party member associated with the chosen Arcana, it is going to be a solo Joker run. The Arcana restriction also applies to confidants, as said Arcana is the only one that we are allowed to progress. Exceptions here are obviously all Arcanas that unlock and or progress automatically, like Mishima or Morgana, and Maruki, who we need to max in order to unlock the Royal exclusive content. Until we get access to the first persona of said Arcana, only Arsene may be used. And of course, we also have the classic run rules like having the difficulty on hard, banning DLC personas, as well as no new game plus. The run officially starts once we get to spend our time freely, which is after the Belphegor battle, considering that we are very limited with our options during the intro and can't really do an awful lot. And that's pretty much it. At the end of the run, I will try to rank the Arcanas and create some sort of a tier list in terms of difficulty, playability and more, so stay tuned. You guys can also vote on which Arcana you want to see next, so feel free to leave your suggestions in the comments. And with that, we're basically ready to head into the run. We start the game, select our difficulty, and get to name our protagonist, and I think for the Chariot Arcana there is no name that is more fitting than Best Girl Ryuji's favorite catchphrase. As we go through the opening cutscenes, let's take a quick look at the personas that are going to accompany us through this. At first glance, we have a total of 11 personas that we could potentially use, but if you take a closer look, some of them will be eliminated rather early. Both Athena and Athena Picaro are DLC personas, and while I was thinking on whether to allow them or not, I came to realize that they are just way too overpowered and would give certain Arcanas a big advantage, so we're not going to use those. The ultimate Chariot persona Chi-Yu unfortunately also gets eliminated, since it is an advanced fusion that requires personas of several different Arcanas, which we're not allowed to get, so from the 11 personas that are theoretically available, we are down to a total of 8. At the first look, we seem to have a pretty good mix of all kinds of different things, but the Chariot generally seems to favor physical attackers. Considering we will go into more details once we unlock them, I think this is enough for now, so let's head back into the main game. Once we unlock An, we get to spend our time freely, and this is where the run officially begins. First of all, we visit the gun shop in order to upgrade our equipment. Considering we only need upgrades for 2 party members, this is not that expensive, and in case you were wondering where the money came from, it's from the free DLC box. While we are not allowed to use DLC personas, the DLC items you get from the box will be allowed, as it helps you get an easier start into the game. The biggest reason for using them, to be honest, are the costumes though, because even though I love the OST of this game, the battle theme does start to get somewhat annoying on your 10th or so playthrough. Anyways, before heading back into Kamoshida's castle, I wanted to stack up on healing items, and here's another thing I noticed. Takami doesn't sell AoE healing medicine until you unlock her confidant, and since we're not allowed to do that, the best possible purchasable healing item will be the Recover R 100mg, which heals a single character for, you might have guessed it, 100 HP. This is not an issue now, but later on could become quite the problem, considering that the Chariot Arcana doesn't have a single persona with higher tier healing spells. We still stack up our items to have some coverage at least, and then head back into the palace. We go through the fusion tutorial, and luckily the result of the tutorial is a Gathion, which is our very first Chariot entry, so we can use it going forward. So while we got the footage running in the background, let's take a quick look at a Gathion. It resists stun and electricity damage and starts off with Dia and Baisudi. Thanks to the Arcana boost, we also get Lunge, and once it levels up, we also get access to Rakukaja, CO, and Dodge Electricity. A decent start, I would say, but nothing really to write home about. Agathion is also the only usable persona in this challenge that gets access to a healing skill with Dia. And this is what I meant before at the clinic. Dia is not really going to cut it during later parts of the game, and the only other Chariot personas to get healing spells are the DLC personas, which are banned, so this could definitely be fun. With that out of the way, let's take a look at how dungeon progression will be. As you can see, we still have a 4-member party, as the game doesn't let you remove party members until you unlock Yusuke later on. Because of this, both Morgana and An will stay in the party, but are only allowed to guard. I am not going to intentionally wait for them to be killed off just yet, because the majority of early battles can be won in a single turn anyways, so it really doesn't make a big difference overall. As for battles themselves, with the upgraded equipment, we really don't have a hard time during earlier parts of the palace. Weakness hits are enough to almost wipe an enemy with a single hit, and guns also put in big work early on. The only encounter we struggle with, ironically, is a set of 3 Agathions. We cannot hit a weakness here, and with them also being resistant to guns, our damage output is not necessarily the highest, especially when they cast Rakukaja. It's not like it's a dangerous battle overall, but due to all of this, it does take quite a while until we get through. Before we approach the mini-boss, we encounter the strong shadow of this dungeon Barif. While we completed most battles earlier within a single turn, the mini-boss is obviously quite a bit bulkier, and I didn't want to have any unfair advantage going in, so we made sure to have both An and Morgana wiped before we get in there. While party members auto-revive with 1 HP after every battle, I figured that this is probably the best I can do for now until we can manually select our party setup going forward. With that being said, let's head into the battle against the mini-boss Archangel. The enemy will always charge on his first turn and then go for either An or Morgana. This is something that we cannot avoid, but we can use that knowledge to get as much damage in as possible, considering we don't need to guard with our main party. After composing for a turn, he charges up yet again, and we're able to barely get him down before he gets his second charged attack off, so this was rather easy. As we progress through the palace though, the battles start to get quite a bit harder. A lot of enemies can't be hit with their weakness, and we often take several turns to finish battles off. Luckily, Ryuji has access to CO, which has a decent chance to shock an enemy, and if you watched previous challenge runs on this channel, you probably already know about the absurd amounts of damage potential that can be achieved with technical hits. Up next are the 2 battles against the Alligors. Those enemies are also weak to electricity, so the plan is to knock them down, shock them, and then just beat away at them. And while shock seems to have a decent chance to stick, in situations where you actually need it, RNG is not in our favor, and after Alligor gets back up, he one-shots Shoko with double fangs, so we get our first game over here. While this was rather unlucky, I am sure this is not going to be our last game over. On attempt number 2, we once again don't get the shock to stick, but luckily the enemy on his first attack wipes on, and Ryuji is able to take the second hit, so we can continue on and beat it on the following turn. On Alligor number 2, we finally get the shock to stick, and here you can see how much easier the battle becomes once we are able to hit technical hits. Not only that, but Agathion also learns CO right after the battle, so we can go for shock strategies on both of our party members now. In the last room before the treasure, we grab a physical ointment, and this leads me to another point I haven't mentioned yet. A few of you may have noticed the absence of the no Tetrakarn and Makarakarn rule during the intro that I usually have for such challenges. The reason for that is that I am pretty sure that some Arcanas may need to abuse repelling strategies in order to beat certain fights. Furthermore, not all Arcanas get access to those skills at all. The Chariot Arcana, for example, doesn't have a single persona which gets either of the 2, so obviously this is going to affect the final rankings as well, which is why I decided to allow them for this format. That being said, the last battle in this palace is against the Will Seed Gatekeeper Slime, and this one isn't worth mentioning for the most part. While we couldn't get the shock on turn 1, Slime usually doesn't attack until turn 2, and once we land the shock, we can abuse technical hits for big damage and are able to get the boss down before it has any chance to attack at all. With the last will seed, we get the Crystal of Lust, and while this one doesn't unlock its full powers until we bring it to Josa in Mementos, it does have the Arama on it by default, so it is already going to be our strongest healing accessory for quite a while now. The party is also level 10 now, at which point we could theoretically get our next Chariot persona Slime. The problem is that Slime doesn't spawn in the palace, and since we're not allowed to recruit anything but Chariot personas, we don't have any means to fuse it either. Slime would be great for Kamoshida because of its physical resistance, but it looks like Agathian will have to do the job for now. Without resist physical on Joker, I was pretty sure that level 10 is not going to cut it for the boss, so we stay in the palace for a bit longer to grind a couple of levels. The small area outside the castle is perfect for this since it only spawns Barifs who give 60 experience per battle, which is by far the most out of any encounter in this dungeon. Thanks to Shock, the battle is also usually rather safe, and we can grab a couple of more levels on the way. Generally, I wasn't all too sure which level we would need for Kamoshida. Since we have a 2-person party, I figured this is going to be much easier compared to a solo setup, so I grinded until the party reaches level 13, at which point we should be able to get through the boss. Back in the real world, we start working on Ryuji's confidant and prepare for the boss by training in our room to increase Choka's max HP. The Chariot run has one huge advantage of getting access to the gym later on, but until then, we can use the chair in Choka's room to get him a little more bulky. On the following day, we sent the calling card and are back into the palace for the game's first big boss fight. Now, you could argue whether or not we should get Arsene Morgana wiped before coming in here, but I figured that it won't make that big of a difference anyways, since Kamoshida's damage should easily be able to be out-healed with the clinic items or the Will Seed accessory. Considering that we can freely choose our party once we get Yusuke later on, this is the only instance of a major boss fight in this scenario, so I think we can just let that slide, especially seeing as a 3-hit volleyball slide on Ryuji only does about 60-ish damage. As for damage from our party, Joka mainly goes for magic attacks as Agathian's magic stat is a bit higher compared to its strength, while Ryuji goes for headbutt to deal good amounts of damage. Once he starts healing, we can also attack the trophy. In order to avoid a buffed golden spike, we intentionally guard with the entire party to make sure his attack buff runs out and then go ahead and destroy the trophy. On the following turn, Kamoshida will always go for golden spike, so once again we guard with everybody, and to be honest, the damage was surprisingly low, much lower than I anticipated at first. On the following turn, we need to get rid of Shio, and I wasn't sure if 2 party members will do enough damage for that, but looking at Ryuji using a baton past headbutt, yeah, this is not going to be an issue. With that, we enter the last phase where we could theoretically send someone to snatch the crown. Realistically though, this is not going to happen. Joka by himself is nowhere near strong enough to do enough damage, so we just cancel it and try to get Kamoshida down the old-fashioned way by smashing his face in. Kamoshida in his last phase only uses Golden Knife once per turn, so the incoming damage really isn't anything we need to worry about any longer. While we do need to occasionally heal with items, the attack only does about 50-ish damage, which we can easily out-heal if necessary. Morgana at this point is already down, and An also only has 4 HP left, so I figured it's only a matter of time before she gets targeted and goes down as well. To my surprise though, Kamoshida for whatever reason decided to just stop targeting her and focused solely on Joker and Ryuji. Towards the end of the battle, I intentionally stalled for several turns and even went to send Ryuji for the crown to reduce the amount of possible targets, but for some reason Kamoshida never went for An. I am not sure whether this is scripted or just ridiculous luck, but at some point I just said screw it and went ahead and beat him to complete dungeon number 1. Looking at how this fight went, I think we might have overgrinded just a little, but without Slime I wasn't quite sure what the sweet spot in terms of levels is going to be. Turns out it is definitely lower than level 13, but hey, we made it and that's all that matters. With that, we got some downtime now before the story continues, and here is where I noticed something. This is usually the point where you can start going out and young Chariot during nighttime, but seemingly this doesn't happen unless you unlock Sochiro's confidant. Since we're not allowed to do that though, we are stuck in LeBlanc during nighttime no matter what. I really hope that this eventually gets resolved somehow, considering not being able to go out during night for the rest of the game would drastically reduce our options. Because of this, we usually try to hang out as much as possible with Yoryuji during the day and either train, craft infiltration tools, or try to get some other social stats up during evenings. Technically, we only need to max out proficiency in order to get the highest technical rank later on, but we will also go for knowledge since I'm not 100% sure whether or not the rank is needed in order to get the exam rewards from Sochiro. The other stats are not our priority now, though we will also rank them up at some point I assume. Once Kamoshida confesses his crimes, we go celebrate with the party and get to name them. And considering it looks like we're grounded at least during nighttime, I figured this would also be a fitting name. Don't judge me, I'm not a creative person at all. On the following day, we automatically unlock Mishima's confidant and also get Ryuji up to rank 5, which unlocks the gym. This is probably going to be one of the biggest advantages of the Chariot Arcana, since it will be the only run where we get access to the gym. We can always train at home to raise our max HP, or go to the temple later on for SP increase, but this is the only run where we can do both at the same time with the help of the gym. The even more surprising thing happened during evening hours though. We get the key from Sochiro and also automatically get his rank 1. I never knew that he unlocks automatically if we don't speak to him until after the Kamoshida arc, but nonetheless, it looks like we're not grounded after all. Can I still change my party's name? The following day, we get the tutorial trip to Mementos, and with that, we're finally able to grab the second Chariot persona as slimes will be spawning on the first couple of floors. Now while you can watch me fail miserably at recruiting, let's take a quick look at slime itself. Slime resists both physical and gun, which would have been incredibly useful against Kamoshida. Although it has 2 weaknesses with fire and wind, we will probably use it over a Gathion due to the much higher attack and endurance stats. Slime also gets access to Taronda, which is great because debuffs, especially early on, are not very easy to come by, so this will make future boss fights quite a bit more manageable. The first boss fight against Oberian is quickly taken care of thanks to its weakness against electricity. Weakness hits and baton passes do huge damage, and it's only a couple of attacks before the enemy is already down again. The extra forget chance on headbutt makes this quite a bit safer as well. With that, our first trip to Mementos is already done again, and we return back to the real world. Considering that we are not allowed to unlock and or progress any confidants, the amounts of requests will be rather low, but we will probably still go back into Mementos on certain occasions to grind materials for item crafting. We start going to the gym regularly and unlock Maruki shortly afterwards. As explained in the rules, Maruki will be the exception as his confidant is required to get the Royal exclusive content, so his confidant will be maxed as well. We continue the tradition of button mashing Morgana, and shortly afterwards, we are already ready to head into the next palace. This is going to be the last segment with a full party setup, as we can manually select our party members once Yusuke joins the team. The strategy is still similar to before though. Try to hit weaknesses if possible and get stuns on otherwise. Thanks to the ailment gun we got gifted in the airsoft shop, we now have another means to get stun onto enemies, so dungeon progression is not a big issue at the moment. Up next, we also get the introduction to treasure demons. As mentioned in the rules, those are the only types of enemies that we're allowed to recruit other than Chariot personas. Treasure demons have all kinds of arcanas, but their main purpose is to either get a persona's rank either up or down. Considering this and the fact that a majority of personas within an arcana don't fuse together well quite a bit, I think allowing treasure demons is fine. The plan here was to upgrade our Agathion into another slime in order to carry over spells like Seo or Iha during fusion, so we can then upgrade it once again to create a Shikyuji as soon as we hit level 18. Unfortunately, my Agathion fuses into Shikyuji as well. Checking the fusion calculator, I found out that Agathion only fuses into slime as long as it's below level 10, which kinda makes sense since at level 10, it will be upgraded to the next higher Chariot Arcana. This kinda threw my fusion plans off a little, especially as I already registered the level 10 Agathion, and I really didn't feel like leveling up another one from scratch again, so we just continue on like normal and use our slime later on since we definitely want to carry Tarunda over to Shikiuchi. Once we reach the barrier, we leave the palace to let Yusuke draw some hentai of on, while the guys take care of Nua in the palace. And needless to say, this battle was incredibly easy. We have been playing the entire game with this setup, so there really isn't anything that could hurt the party, and a few attacks later, the battle is already over again. Yusuke awakens to his persona, and we now have to battle Ippon-Datsura, who is accompanied by a couple of Kappa Tengus. Not having access to Mabufu or any ice magic for this battle hurts quite a bit. We can still get a one more by using freeze sprays, but this takes quite a while and is also relatively heavy on our item resources. Luckily, Ippon-Datsura himself doesn't do a lot of damage once we got the Tarunda on, so at least we don't have to worry too much about incoming damage. Once all Kappa Tengus are gone, only the boss is left, who follows just a few attacks after, and we leave the palace again for now. The following day, we get Ryuji to rank 7 in order to unlock his insta-kill ability. We are not super over-leveled at the moment, but down the line, this could make things rather easy when it comes to potential need for grinding. This is another reason why I can see the Chariot Arcana being one of the strongest ones in the entire game, seeing as this ability alone can easily break entire runs. Anyways, we are back into the palace on the following day and are now finally able to manually set our party composition, so going forward, we will now only have a 2 party member party permanently. In terms of battle strategy, it all remains the same though. If we can't hit a weakness, we usually try to shock the enemies and follow up with technical hits. The same strategy also goes for the mini-boss Kurama Tengu, who is accompanied by 2 Kappa Tengus. While the Seiyu didn't proc anything, we are able to stun all 3 enemies with our ailment gun and are able to put down Kurama Tengu before the shock wears off. Afterwards, all there is left is clearing up the 2 Kappa Tengus and we're already done again. After the battle, we also get our first skill card drop, and this is something I want to talk about for a bit. There are several ways you can obtain skill cards in this game. Some are dropped by certain Mementos bosses, some personas have a skill card as a reward for the electric chair execution, and some can be gained in battle during item negotiation while being held up. This is the main reason we banned both recruiting and item negotiation for all other Arcanas. With this mechanic, we could easily break the game wide open and basically make this entire challenge obsolete, so again, we will only stick with our main Arcana for those as well. Other than that, progression goes by pretty smooth, though there are some annoying things on the way, such as Onmoraki using Evil Touch to few party members, which can lead to Ryuji running away from battle, leaving only Joker behind. Onmoraki itself is not strong at all, so this is not a big issue, but in certain enemy formations, this could become tricky, so this is definitely something we want to watch out for. The second mini-boss battle is against 3 Makami, and this one is easily taken care of with Seiyu and all-out attacks. We beat the enemies before they are able to get a single hit in. Once we hit level 18, we immediately head back into the Velvet Room to get access to our newest Chariot persona, the almighty Shikiuchi. I have raved about Shikiuchi in the past, but for completion's sake, let's take a quick look. Shikiuchi is the first persona to completely null all kinds of physical and gun attacks. Not only that, but it also nulls both Bless and Curse, which also makes it immune to insta-kill attacks. With Shikiuchi, we also get access to Psy Magic. But wait, that's not all. It has incredible electric chair rewards with double shot and especially triple down during Fusion Alarm. From a pure elemental affinity point, Shikiuchi is also probably the best persona of all chariots, so getting it this early is huge. With that, the only battle left is the Woolseed Gatekeeper or Habaki, and this is always one of the trickier ones. The strategy here is to try and get a freeze on with Mabufu that we carried on from the Treasure Demon, and then try to hit technical hits on the enemy. This all works pretty well until the freeze doesn't stick. Flash Bomb does good damage and can also cause dizzy, but since it is a physical attack, only Ryuji is affected by it. The much more dangerous attack is Brain Check, which can brainwash party members. And while that alone is already pretty nasty, what's even worse is the follow-up Mobsio, which deals technical damage, so if we get brainwashed, we have to cure it as soon as somewhat possible. Eventually Ryuji goes down, but we can bring him back again with items, though the enemy usually follows up with another attack that puts him down again immediately. Eventually, Brain Check hits both party members and we're unable to cure anything before the Mobsio, which leads to our next game over. On the second attempt, we once again get rather bad luck with the freeze procs, but we're eventually almost able to whittle it down, and literally on the last turn it brainwashes both party members again and then proceeds to wipe them with another Mobsio. On attempt 3, I had decided that enough is enough and just went for freeze sprays since those have a much higher chance to proc the status. With that, we can easily take care of the enemy and beat it within 3 turns without getting attacked a single time. As a reward, we get the Crystal of Vanity, which removes all weaknesses from a party member, which could become pretty useful in the upcoming battle against Madarame. The party at this point is level 18, and once again I wasn't sure how far I need to grind in order to get the victory. The null physical on Shikiuchi is already a huge advantage, but I still wanted to make sure to be properly prepared, so we grinded some more experience against the strong Shadow, which is also Shikiuchi, until we reach level 20 with both party members. Once that is done, we leave the palace and also get access to the electric chair. With our current personas, we could get either Seo, Taronda or Double Shot, but considering we already have 2 of those on Shikiuchi anyways, we only execute the Agathion for a Seo card. With ice and electricity magic, Shikiuchi has quite some coverage not only on elements, but also on potential status ailments. And as I am writing this, I also noticed that we have the media skill card that got dropped from the mini-boss earlier. This is actually pretty huge since we only get access to Dia otherwise, and while it's still only a tier 1 healing spell, it's AoE, which helps out quite a bit. See, this is another good reason why I'm writing this script as I go through the run, because otherwise I probably wouldn't have even noticed this. Anyways, we return to the real world only to send the calling card on the following day and are then back into the palace to head for the boss fight against Madarame. This is always one of those that I'm rather afraid of, but this time I am actually rather confident, at least for phase 1. Shikiuchi nulls physical damage, which already neutralizes the mouth, and also doesn't have a weakness against any of the painting Madarame's attacks. All of this doesn't even matter though, because Ryuji's Rampage deals pretty big damage to all portrait parts that can be damaged with physical attacks. It's only 2 hits until everything but the mouth is down already, and afterwards we just take down whatever is left and easily transition into phase 2 when Madarame summons the 4 fakes. This might be the first time where phase 2 is the trickier one, seeing as we're only able to build a rather small baton pass with only 2 party members. This phase heavily relies on passing the baton to deal maximum damage, but even with only 2 party members, the damage is not too shabby. The wind fake unfortunately targets Ryuji and wipes him, but we can easily bring him back and continue on. Choka not having a weakness to any of the elements used is certainly a big advantage, and we can continue on doing damage to Madarame. For healing, we still go for the recover 100 mg, but if party members get really low on HP, we can always use a beat as well. Or just revive Ryuji, because the wind fake again takes him out. Once Ryuji takes out the wind fake, Madarame summons a new one, but this time it's another ice fake, so the enemies literally cannot hit any weaknesses any longer. The fight takes quite a bit considering we regularly have to heal, to the point where we even get painted by Madarame. I didn't even know he can do this in phase 2, as we are usually able to finish him off long before that ever happens. We guard through the paint and are able to finally beat Madarame a few turns later, therefore successfully completing Palace number 2. This was a rather interesting battle, as for the first time it was phase 2 that was quite a bit trickier than phase 1. Usually the battle is won once the portrait parts are gone, but this time around the fight only started when we transitioned into the fakes. Now that we secured the treasure, we got some downtime again. Since our options are rather limited, we usually hang out with Ryuji or go to the gym. Then there is also Operation Maid Watch, and it hurts me to deliberately not go for Kawakami since her confidant is just too good. Generally, I struggle with free time in this playthrough a lot since I'm totally not used to having this little options when it comes to optimally spending your time. That being said, we go on the school trip shortly afterwards where we automatically unlock Kasumi's confidant, but just like everybody else, she will stay at rank 1. Another thing I haven't mentioned yet is the laundromat. I think this is the first time in forever that we'll have Choka wash his own junk since I usually like to wait until we get Kawakami ranked up to do that for him. Shoutouts to this little cutscene with Sojiro afterwards that I totally didn't know is a thing up until now. Funny how I still learn new things about this game after 5 years. A few days after, we also get the last rank of Ryuji's confidant, so we are able to max him out after only 2 dungeons. We would also unlock the ultimate persona Chiyu that way, but as mentioned earlier, it is an advanced fusion that requires several different other arcanas, so unfortunately we're not going to be able to fuse it. Shortly afterwards, we unlock Kichioji, and there are a couple of useful things here. First of all, we have the second-hand clothes shop, which not only gives you money for the dirty armor you find in dungeons, but the points can be exchanged for items. That is not that useful yet, but later on we can unlock ultimate sprays here, which you can buy a total of 3 every month. Those serve as debilitate, and considering we have no way to get it on any of our personas, this is going to become pretty important for later boss fights, I assume. Then there is also the temple where you can pray to increase your max SP. With the Chariot Arcana, this is not as important seeing as we got access to the gym, but this will be a very important place for future Arcana runs. We also got the Jazz Club here, but unfortunately it won't see any use in any Arcana run except the Justice one. And even then it will barely be any useful as we could only use it during Sundays with Futaba or with Akechi during the last 2 months of the game. And last but not least, there is obviously the darts and billiards place. Most of you that have watched previous challenge runs of this game probably know how broken a fully maxed baton pass in combination with technical hits can be, so we will try to max both of those as soon as possible. This is also the reason why we heavily focused on getting our proficiency up early. We need max proficiency for the last technical rank, and considering we don't need any other social stats for the most part, might as well get that up quickly. We spend some more time with Maruki, hang out with the Twin Wardens for some extra skill cards, and max out Choka's and Ryuji's baton pass rank, as well as get the first 2 technical rank ups. Before heading into the next dungeon, we return to Mementos to clear the few quests we have gotten in the meantime. Considering we can't rank up any other confidants, the amount of requests we got is very little, but we need to make our way down eventually anyways, so why not start early? Once we are done with everything, we return to the real world, max our proficiency and our technical rank due to it, and a few days later it is already time for dungeon number 3. First of all, we have to beat 2 sets of 2 Onis each, and just to demonstrate the potential of technical hits, watch how we easily one-shot a frozen Oni with Shikiuchi. Makoto awakens to her persona and both she and Morgana get forced into the party for the next battle. Just like in Kamoshida's castle earlier, we will guard with both of them while Choka and Ryuji take care of the enemies. Again we use Mazio and Mabufu to get statuses on the enemies and then clean up with technical hits. The Onis are quickly taken care of, and once Suiki is stunned as well, he follows them shortly afterwards. After we return to the palace on the following day, we get the force tutorial on showtime attacks that we won't be able to use anyways, and then continue on with our usual 2-man party. When it comes to random encounters, there really isn't much to talk about. The combination of status elements plus technical hits annihilates pretty much everything in our path, and progression is rather smooth. The battle against the 4 Orobas is also quickly taken care of thanks to a Mabufu followed by an all-out attack. Once we reach level 25 with Joker, we return to the Velvet Room since it is time to fuse our next Chariot persona in Kinky. Kinky, just like most other Chariot personas, is heavily physical focused and also resists physical damage as well as repelling gun attacks. And while Kinky certainly would be a good persona to use, I can't really justify ditching our beloved Shikiuchi for it. The most interesting thing about it is probably the skill cards we can get from the electric chair. Vicious Strike especially is a rather strong AoE physical attack, so this might be something to look for once we unlock the fusion alarm later on. That being said, we still use our Shikiuchi to get to Kinky, only to use the Queen's Necklace to rank it down again into Shikiuchi. Queen's Necklace has a lot of debuffs that we can carry over during fusion, and with Treasure Demons always either ranking to the next higher or lower one, we can use them to fuse our chariots around and get additional skills onto them. And because this game is fun, this is also where we get our first fusion accident, where our planned Shikiuchi turns into a Satanta. Since this one is an Emperor Arcana, we obviously have to ditch it, but I would have laughed if we'd actually gotten a Chariot here by accident. Once we finally got the Shikiuchi we want, we immediately turned into Kinky yet again and put all debuff skills onto it. Shikiuchi only has so many skill slots available, so having a dedicated persona for debuffs is definitely not a bad idea. With that, we head into the first real mini-boss fight of the palace against Fuki, Suiki and the just fused Kinky, now on the other side of the battlefield. Now it might be shocking to hear, but we once again try to get ailments onto the enemies in order to get technical hits off. This works rather well, and after 2 turns only Kinky is left, who is pretty much done already as well. Unfortunately, I already forgot that Kinky repels guns, so Ryuji wipes himself, but after getting him back up, we can go for the final blow and win the battle. The next mini-boss battle is against Companda, and unsurprisingly, Shock works incredibly well here as well. A sledgehammer by Kinky almost one-shots the enemy, so the battle is over again rather quickly. Same thing goes for the Will Seed Gatekeeper Cerberus, another Chariot persona we will get later on by the way. We once again stun it, and 3 hits later it is already down, and we retrieve the last Will Seed. And this one might be one of the most important ones, as the accessory carries the Marakukaja spell. Seeing as Athena and Athena Picaro are DLC and therefore not allowed, we basically have no other way to get access to a party-wide defense buff, so this may prove to be very useful. Once we are ready to leave the palace, we also get to unlock the fusion alarm, and here is where things get interesting. For now we can only use it for itemization, but this is already a huge deal as Shikiuchi during fusion alarm itemizes into a triple down skill card, which is quite a nice gun skill. And if this wasn't enough already, later on we will get access to White Rider, who just so happens to itemize into gun boost during regular and into gun amp during fusion alarm, so we can push the damage on triple down quite a bit. Combine that with the fact that gun skills hit technical hits on both freeze and shock, and you can imagine the amounts of possible damage output we're going to reach with this very combination. We still stay in the palace for a little longer to grind a few levels on the Takemi Nakata, and once we reach level 30, we should be good to go for the most part. We leave the palace, sell off our loot and wash our new armor at the laundromat, before sending the calling card on the following day. With that, we head into big boss fight number 3 against Kanashiro. For phase 1, we have to take care of Piggy Drop. We start the battle by putting a Taronda up to reduce the incoming damage, and then go to work on the boss. Piggytron will usually use Missile Party, which can potentially burn the party, while we get super lucky of course and get the double burn. The other attack is Ocular Vulcan, which is a physical attack, so with Shikiuchi equipped, we want Choka to be the main target here. Ryuji can buff our defense with the newly acquired accessory, and once Piggytron is ready to roll out, we guard with both party members, and looking at the damage numbers, this probably wasn't needed since the attack only does about 35 damage. As for damage on our end, we go for double shot on Shikiuchi since I forgot to put the triple down skill card on, and Assault Death on Ryuji. Once we throw the item to stop Kanashiro, Piggytron will only attack with either Missile Party, Metabolic Wave, which is another physical attack, or Fear Gas, which can obviously fear the entire party. And Fear Gas might just be the worst of his attacks. Even though it does no damage, the fear can potentially make both party members unable to act in the case where they get hit by it. Piggytron is very tanky, unfortunately the incoming damage for the most part is rather low, so we can easily heal up if necessary. If party members get very low on HP, we can also use a beat to make sure nobody goes down too quickly. Towards the end of phase 1, we make sure to be somewhat healed up before we head into phase 2, where we now have to incapacitate the 2 guards in order to directly damage Kaneshiro. Kaneshiro immediately opens up with Lullaby, and Shikiuchi once again is a huge help here, since the enemies will always attack the sleeping party member to get technical hits in, but with Shikiuchi nulling physical attacks, Joker is practically invincible here. During our Mementos trip earlier, we have also gotten a couple of AoE sleep vials to put all party members to sleep, but I first wanted to try and shock them, since shock does not automatically wear off once the enemies get hit. The first Mazio shocks the big guard, and the second one shocks Kaneshiro himself. Unfortunately, the shock on the guard already wore off, so we're going to go with a combination of Mabufu and Mazio now for an eventual freeze or shock. Since we never really got lucky on the procs, I said screw it eventually and went for Onikagura on Shikiuchi. While raging the enemies is definitely a double-edged sword, they take way more damage this way, so we can also get rid of them quicker. Case in point, this combination of Swift Strike from Ryuji and Onikagura afterwards, which almost got rid of both guards simultaneously. After that, it's just one more turn, and the moment that Kaneshiro starts using Make It Rain, we are practically done with the battle. One more turn is all we need, and we are able to successfully beat Palace number 3 on the very first try. Although I was a bit afraid of phase 2, I have to say that this went pretty smooth for the most part, so there really isn't anything I could complain about so far. With Kaneshiro out of the way, we got some downtime again where we mostly visit the gym, since there is pretty much nothing else we can do in our free time. We already maxed out Ryuji, Maruki can't be completed until we get Haru later on, and we already got pretty much everything else we need for this challenge as well. Occasionally we craft infiltration tools to have a decent stock of the most important items, but other than that, there really isn't much going on. During evenings, we can occasionally hang out with the Twin Wardens to get some more skill cards, but that's pretty much it. We also work the part-time jobs in order to unlock some of the momentous requests during summer break later on. Unfortunately, we're not able to work at the bar since it requires to unlock Oya's confidant first, so we will miss out on that one unfortunately. Speaking of requests, we return to Mementos to go through the next area as well. During this, we head to the Velvet Room to fuse the next Chariot persona Aramitama, who can be unlocked at level 30. Looking at its stats though, we will probably not use it a lot. While the skills it learns are relatively nice, its affinities really are not that special and pale in comparison to Shikiuchi, so while it has some situational use thanks to Fryla and Matsukasha, Shikiuchi will definitely remain our main persona going forward. Other than that, there isn't anything that would be worth mentioning about this Mementos segment, so we return to the real world once we completed all open requests. A few days later, we are ready to head into the next palace, so off we are into the pyramid. And I know I say this on pretty much every Persona 5 video, but this palace has the easiest boss fight in the entire game. No matter how hard the challenge is, this is usually the free part where we get to relax for a while, so let's see how it will turn out this time around. The first mini-boss fight is against Garuda, and unsurprisingly Shock once again takes care of things. The Tom Pass, hit the technical, and we're already done again. Up next is the first of 2 fights against Maud. Maud is rather tanky, but just like most other enemies, we can put ailments onto it. This time it is Rage we can use to hit great technical damage with Psych skills. After the summon by Maud, Ryuji gets another lucky shock proc, and that's all we need to beat the enemies and win the battle. The same strategy will be used for Maud number 2 as well, though this time we get unlucky as Joker gets feared, but luckily we're still able to hit through it. At least once. Maud's Megiddo does quite some damage, but nothing that could be considered dangerous or anything, and after getting a lucky freeze on Mabufu, we're able to take Maud down even before we got all the summons out of the way. With that, the only battle left to do is against the Woolseed Gatekeeper Alilad. In this battle, we will work with the Burn ailment to be able to hit technical hits with nuke magic. Alilad repels both physical and gun attacks, so Burn is our alternative of choice here. Unfortunately, Ryuji gets frozen and put into Endure shortly afterwards, but we are able to take the enemy down before it can get to Ryuji again and retrieve the last Will Seed. As you can see, we are pretty much breezing through the game right now, and I honestly don't expect the boss to be any different. Before we leave, we head into the Velvet Room where we can unlock the Gallows function, and this may be one of the most important ones. By sacrificing treasure demons, we can get big experience onto our other personas, mainly Shikiuchi, and level them up quite a bit. The XP requirement for personas for a level up gets pretty huge after some time, so we make use of Gallows to have them not fall behind the levels too much. I highly suspect that Shikiuchi will be our main persona until the end of the game, so we need to make sure it keeps up with the party's levels as well. Once we're done, we leave the palace and get to hang out with Ryuichi during our summer vacation. And I think this is actually the very first time I have ever done one of those summer hangout events, and considering we have more than enough free time, spending an extra day really doesn't hurt at all. Once that is done, we send the calling card on the following day and head back into the palace to fight Shadow Wakaba. Since phase 1 is scripted anyways, we skip forward to the point where Futaba awakens to a persona and the real battle begins. We send Ryuichi to the ballista and put some debuffs on the boss while he's at it. With Shikiuchi equipped, Wing Blast is literally the only attack that can hurt Joker, and once Wakaba is down on the ground, we can do huge damage to her with physical and gun attacks. With only 2 party members though, we do nowhere near enough damage to take her down before she gets up in the air again, and this is a problem. Ryuichi doesn't have any ranged physical skills, so is pretty much useless during this time. Luckily, we still got triple down on Shikiuchi to do some good damage. Ryuichi's job at this point is to mostly buff Joker, but thanks to his wind weakness, the party takes quite some damage and the extra dizzy proc from Wing Blast can be incredibly annoying. Doesn't it suck when enemies actually use ailments against you? In fact, the battle became such a big issue that Ryuichi actually got close to going down several times. We even had to use the Wine of Grace we have gotten in the church earlier to fully heal the party. With the weakness hits, Wakaba can attack up to 3 times each turn, which is especially bad for Ryuichi, who has his Endure triggered shortly afterwards. Ryuichi does already have the Evade Wind passive, but because Lady Luck is not on our side, it barely seems to trigger during this fight. Luckily, shortly afterwards, we get another chance to send Ryuichi to the ballista, and once we get Wakaba to the ground, we're finally able to finish her off for good and complete the next palace. Not going to lie, I was not expecting this battle to be nearly as bad. This is usually the easiest boss fight in the entire game, but this time it was the boss that gave us the biggest troubles so far. Ryuichi being weak to wind is certainly a major reason why the fight went the way it did, but still, I would have never expected this battle in particular to be so tricky. Anyways, we gain 2 levels and get to level 38, which means that we're now able to fuse White Rider, so as always, let's take a quick look at it. White Rider gets a variety of attacks, from physical and magical, to buffs and also ailments. Like mentioned earlier already, by far the biggest thing with White Rider though is the skill cards that we can get through the electric chair. We already got triple down thanks to Shikiuchi, and if the combination with Baton Pass and technical hits wasn't enough already, we can now gain access to both gun boost as well as gun aim through White Rider's electric chair execution. This is huge and will raise our damage even more, so I expect everything that can be shocked or frozen to go down in 1 or 2 hits at most. White Rider will also be the last persona we will get for a while, seeing as the next 2 are Athena and Athena Picaro, both of which are DLC and therefore not allowed, so the next Chariot usable will be Cerberus at level 55. Since we have quite some downtime now, we once again go back to get more skill cards during the strength hangouts, as well as going to the gym to raise our max HP and SP. During Sundays we make sure to visit the church to buy more Wine of Grace, and once Futaba recovers, she joins the party and we also get the automatic rank 1 unlock of her confidant. And while we're not allowed to rank her up any further, rank 1 is already incredibly useful as it contains party-wide buffs as well as heals if necessary. With Futaba joining, the next path of mementos also opens up, so we return there to get through it and also complete the requests we have gotten in the meantime. And here I would quickly like to show off the ridiculous amounts of damage we can now do with this mementos boss fight. We shock the enemy using our stun gun, Ryuji knocks the enemy down, passes over to Joker, and boom, we're dealing big damage. And that was without any buffs, debuffs, or charges, so I think it's relatively easy to see how much damage potential this setup has. Going in, I was already pretty sure that the Chariot Arcana would rank pretty high, but honestly, this combination alone leads me to believe that Chariot will be on top of the list once we're done with everything. After all the requests are completed, we return to the real world where we're about to head for the Hawaii trip. We hang out with best girl Ryuji because there is literally no other option, and once we return to Japan, we basically head into the next palace straight away. Haru awakens to her persona, and we have to fight her fiancé next. Just like before, both Morgana and Haru get forced into our lineup, so we will just defend with them while Joker and Ryuji take care of the enemies. Luckily in Royal, all robots are neutral to gun damage, so you probably already know what that means. While we can't get any elements onto the boss, he's weak to Psy magic, so after knocking him down, we take him out with ease thanks to Triple Down. Same goes for the chief fights that follow after. We usually hit a weakness with Ryuji, and the baton pass Triple Down takes care of things. In a setup like this, I would usually be really worried about the upcoming boss fight later on, but with Triple Down, Gun Boost and Amp, I really don't see us having a lot of problems. The robot army is pretty much free as well. We throw a Psy Wheel to knock them all down in order to guarantee Triple Down to hit, and then just take them all out at once. Nothing to worry about here. The last battle as always is the Will Seed Gatekeeper, in this instant Melchizedek, but just like before, he's no issue thanks to freeze and guns. While we do get unlucky with 2 counters in a row which lead to Ryuji having his Endure triggered, the fight still isn't any hard, and we beat the enemy on the following turn. Once we're done with everything, we leave the palace, wash the newly acquired clothes on the next day, and then send the calling card before battling Okamura's robot army. Now, the strategy for the individual robot waves is rather simple. Use Triple Down. That's pretty much it. Ryuji will play the role of support by using Tarokaja on Joker, and also occasionally throw a weakness item for a baton pass. As you can see, we are pretty much breezing through the waves without any bigger issues. Wave 5 was the only one I was slightly worried about, so thanks to the Rakukash on Wave 4, we can stall enough time for Okamura to issue the sacrifice order here already. Once Wave 5 hit and I saw our damage without a baton pass, I was pretty sure that this is pretty much won. The last big boy can be mitigated with elements again, so we make sure to keep him permafreezed, not only for the technical damage, but also to prevent any incoming attacks from the enemy itself. Once the last big enemy is down, we guard Robot Haru's explosion, and a single hit to Okamura afterwards is enough to win the battle. And yeah, Triple Down basically made this free. I can already see this being a boss where multiple other Arcanas are going to struggle big time, but that's a problem for future Ragnar. Current Ragnar goes brrrr with Triple Down and annihilates everything on his way. Since we got some downtime now again, we can focus on other things. With Haru unlocked, we can finally advance Maruki further and also not go to the gym any longer. Joker's HP is already so high that he will hit the HP cap rather soon from level ups, so instead of the gym, we go to the temple in Kichiuchi, which will raise Joker's max SP. We also get a short glimpse into the final dungeon of the game as Kasumi awakens to her persona. Since Ryuji is not part of this segment, we have to beat the enemy using only Joker, but luckily we can just shock it and then easily win the battle by once again using Triple Down. A few days later, we finish the Knowing Your Heart book, which unlocks several new types of technical hits we can get via status ailments. Not that we really need it, but having more options is always useful. And since there isn't anything particularly interesting happening in the meantime, we skip forward to the point where Akechi blackmails the party into joining, and we're off into the next palace. The tutorial Osei only exists to teach you about Akechi's almighty skills, since he literally resists everything else, but luckily we can still take it down easily thanks to Triple Down. The first real mini-boss of the dungeon is Nebiros. Nebiros is immune to all status ailments, but he has a bless weakness, so once we knock him down using items, we can go to work again with Triple Down. Brainwash unfortunately hits both party members, but Detox kicks in and we can already beat the enemy before it can even cause any troubles. The last mini-boss for part 1 of the palace is Norn, who is annoying for several reasons. First of all, it can use Gorodine to hit Ryuji's weakness and deal good damage. It's also immune to all status ailments, so no technical hit shenanigans either. And to top it off, you usually have to try to beat it within a single turn, since it will use the Arahan to fully heal itself otherwise. Luckily, Triple Down alone is almost enough to finish the job already, and we finish the battle off with another unnecessary crit. After visiting Sai in the courtroom on the following day, we return to the palace for part 2 of the dungeon. To start things off, we battle the Will Seed Gatekeeper Baal, and yeah, I don't think I need to repeat myself here. You can see the very unsurprising strategy. Up next, we have Raja Naga, who technically nulls electricity, and while we could still shock it with our ailment gun, we go for the freeze here, since this version also resists guns as far as I can remember, and the freeze status bypasses any physical resistances or immunities. 2 triple downs later, we are already done again, and head into the arena next, where we have to go through 3 battles using only Joker. And once again, Shikiuchi makes this completely free. The 2 Ganeshas of the first fight only use Miracle Punch, which we null, so we have no issues taking them out. The 3 Rangdas in the second battle only use Aigon, which Shikiuchi nulls again, so we take them out one by one with Bufula, and the last battle against Thor is just like battle number 1 in the sense that he only uses physical attacks as well. So yeah, Shikiuchi literally nulls all sources of damage in this battle, so there is no way we can lose here. And that is pretty much everything we can do in this palace, so we leave shortly afterwards and await the final showdown against Sai. In the meantime, we go back into Mementos to explore the new path and also complete the last few requests on the way. Once we hit level 56, it is now time to fuse the newest Chariot persona, which is Cerberus. Just like pretty much all other Chariot personas, Cerberus' elemental affinities don't come close to Shikiuchi, but there are 2 other useful things to mention here. The first one being the Electric Chair Execution, which grants us a God's Hand skill card during Fusion Alarm. This is a really strong physical attack that we can use as backup in scenarios where we can't use gun attacks. The other thing is that it learns Enduring Soul at level 60, which is a great safety anchor and definitely something we eventually want to carry over to Shikiuchi as well. During Fusion, we also carry over as many elemental skills as possible, to have big coverage against Shadow Sai later on, where we can't rely on just using gun attacks for the majority of the battle. Once we're done with everything, we return to the real world and try to kill time until the final showdown with Sai arrives. In Kishi-Uchi, we can already buy ultimate sprays, which lower all stats of the enemy, and considering we got no access to debilitate in this setup, those items are super valuable. Unfortunately, we can only buy 3 of them each month, but this is still something that might become pretty important later on, so we want to make sure to build a decent stock of those. Since there is literally nothing else to do, we usually visit the shrine during day to further increase our max SP and create infiltration tools, or go to the gym a couple of more times during the evenings. At some point, we literally have maxed out Joker's max HP, so during evenings we will have to kill time some other way, or just go to sleep early. On the very last day before Maruki leaves school, I also noticed that I never actually fully maxed him out, but luckily he was already at rank 8, so hanging out with him one more time was all that was needed. I was so occupied with maxing Joker's stats that I never realized that Maruki was stuck at rank 8, and this almost came back to cost me in the end. But luckily I realized this rather big mistake just in time and was still able to turn it around at the last second. With that being said, we get him to max rank and are back into the palace on the following day for the final showdown with Sai. As always, phase 1 is scripted, where she will cheat the roulette, we catch her in the act, and then transition into the actual battle. Sai will now spin the roulette, and I was fully expecting her to land on either wind or nuke, since those are the weaknesses of the equipped personas, and of course it lands on wind. While this is somewhat good since Ryuji can do full damage with his magic attacks, he can also get hit with weakness hits, which do quite some damage as well. And considering that Ryuji's magic stat is literally the worst out of all party members, his Seodyne casts don't really do a lot of damage anyways. Because of this, he mostly casts President's Insight from the Okamura Will Seed accessory to put Concentrate on Joker and have him do damage with our multi-elemental Cerberus we prepared earlier. And this works out pretty well for the most part. A charged Mazionga does about 900 damage, so this is definitely not too shabby. When Sai spins the roulette again, it lands on Bless, which kinda felt random considering nobody had a Bless weakness or anything. This was pretty much perfect for Joker though, since Shikiuchi not only knows Bless, but we also got Maiga on it, so we can do full damage to Sai that way. Only 2 hits later, she once again spins the roulette for it to land on Almighty, so going forward, she will be neutral to everything again. Ryuji guards the Berserker dance and barely manages to not get us into a trigger, and with Sai already being very low on HP, it's only a couple of more attacks before she goes down, and another battle is won. This boss fight went very smooth for the most part, though I like to dedicate this victory to our Ultra Elemental Cerberus, who was ready for almost every possible scenario. With the victory over Sai, we now have an eternity full of cutscenes ahead of us. Once we get done with skipping through everything, we are basically already in the next palace, so off we go into Shido's ship. As always, there are 5 mini-bosses ahead of us, not including the battle against Akechi towards the end, so let's get started with number 1 right away. Mini-boss number 1 is Yamato no Orochi, who can be shocked, and you probably know what that means. Megaton Raid, Baton Pass, Triple Down, and we're already done again. Same goes for mini-boss number 2 for Neas. For Neas is a bit more annoying since he likes to brainwash party members and also has insta-heal, so the shock doesn't stick for very long. Still, we can do pretty good damage, and it's only 2 attacks until we're done with it again. Mini-boss number 3 is not as free though, as it's a Hanuman that is being accompanied by 2 Garudas. While Hanuman is weak to ice, he also has the evade ice passive, so hitting a weakness is not as easy. Hanuman also likes to enrage the Garudas, and as you can see, this can deal huge damage, so we definitely want to make sure to keep Shikiuchi equipped at all times. Ryuji goes down eventually, but after bringing him back, we can get rid of both Garudas, and once Hanuman is by himself, he can't do an awful lot anymore. We try to knock it down with ice attacks, and then go for triple down until mini-boss number 3 is down as well. After the battle, Ryuji also gets to level 63, at which point he learns Charge, so we now got 2 incredibly strong physical attackers. Since Joker has also reached level 64 in the meantime, we are now able to fuse our final Chariot Arcana for this run, which is Thor, so let's look into him for a little. Although Thor is not too bad on the elemental affinity side of things, Shikiuchi still outperforms every other Chariot, so we will keep him as our main physical persona. We will, however, use our Shikiuchi to fuse it with the Empress element treasure demon we got earlier to create a new Cerberus with various tier 3 elemental spells, and then turn it into Thor so he can cover the magical side of things. Thor learns Wild Thunder, which is the AoE version of the tier 4 electricity spell, and combined with the Thunder amp he gets, he should be able to put out decent numbers in the rare case where gun attacks are no option. Once we are finished with our fusion chain, we continue on with the dungeon, but before we head for mini-boss number 4, we make a quick detour to grab the last will seed, which is guarded by a Kali and 2 Dakinis. This setup is basically a beefed up version of the regular enemies you can encounter on the ship, and while they all null gun attacks, they also exclusively attack with physical attacks, so with Shikiuchi equipped, Joker is once again invincible. Again, we can try freezing the enemies in order to bypass the gun immunity and deal good damage. Ryuji getting raged increases his damage output, but also makes him take a lot more damage, so he eventually goes down. Since Joker is invincible though, I decided to leave Ryuji down until we get rid of 2 of the 3 enemies, and only bring him back once we're about to finish the battle. With the last will seed retrieved, we can continue getting our letters of recommendation, as we head into mini-boss battle number 4 against Oberon, who is accompanied by 2 Titanias. And this was probably the battle that I was most afraid of, since the Titanias love to spam Freidyne, which is Shikiuchi's only weakness. Because of this, we want to try and get rid of the Titanias as quickly as possible. We get real lucky with Joker dodging the attack, and the following triple down is enough to take both Titanias out, as well as almost getting Oberon down already. While he resummons 2 new Titanias, Ryuji manages to shock all 3 enemies with the following Mazionga, and another triple down already ends the battle. The last mini-boss is Ongyoki, and while this one may look dangerous on the outside, it is once again completely walled by the one and only Shikiuchi. This version of Ongyoki is neutral to everything, so we can use triple down as well as Ryuji's charged Megaton Raid to deal big damage to the enemy. I decided to ignore the defense debuffs and just go full out on offense, which eventually led to Ryuji going down, but considering the boss was pretty much finished already, I just decided to leave him laying and finish the battle off with one more triple down. I know I said this before, but it's completely ridiculous just how many bosses get completely walled thanks to Shikiuchi. Speaking of getting walled, we're up against Akechi next, and the first 2 phases of the battle once again can easily be mitigated thanks to Shikiuchi. Akechi's summoned personas only use physical attacks, and after quickly taking care of those, we head into phase 1 Akechi. This one is a copy of his rank 8 confidant battle where he pretty much only uses physical, bless and curse attacks, all of which are nulled by Shikiuchi. Considering Akechi highly focuses on Joker during this battle, Ryuji doesn't really have to be afraid of any incoming damage either. The Megidolon towards the end doesn't do a whole lot, and we transition into last phase Akechi. This one admittedly is a little trickier than the earlier phases. In this form, he will start casting both Tetrakarn and Makarakan regularly, so we attack with either Joker to break the physical one, or cast Seodyne with Ryuji to break the magical one. Akechi attacks twice each turn and still heavily favors Joker, though he can also target Ryuji occasionally. The battle is still relatively safe though until we get into phase 2, where he will start casting Maragion and Maiga on the same turn regularly. While Joker can block the curse attack, Ryuji takes damage from both of them, so keeping him alive can be tricky at times. Occasionally, Akechi will also cast Makarakan and then throw out a single target attack, at which points we try to get the majority of damage in. Ryuji eventually gets his Endure triggered, and we throw a Wine of Grace to make sure that nobody goes down. Futaba comes in with a clutch Heat Riser, and once Joker takes the Levantine, one more attack is enough to get him down and complete the last battle before getting to the palace's treasure. This is also the first time that I haven't maxed out Akechi in a playthrough, so while we speed through those cutscenes, you can still certainly tell that there are a couple of things missing here. Anyways, we sent the calling card on the following day, and after watching all the cutscenes, are now ready to head into the big boss battle against Shido. And the first thing I noticed is that the game put Ann and Morgana back into a party. Since I never checked if they were already added before the battle, we reload to save to check, and yeah, seems like the game just automatically adds party members into your setup to make it a full party for Shido. Well, guess we will just guard with Morgana and Ann again, just like in Kamoshida's palace earlier. Now on to the boss himself. The first fight against Shido is split into 3 phases, where phase 1 repels all forms of physical and gun damage, and this might be the trickiest of them all, considering we have heavily relied on physical damage throughout pretty much the entire playthrough. Thor's Wild Thunder does close to 400 damage, which isn't all too bad considering we only need to deplete like 2,500 HP before he switches into the next phase. Shido mainly spams physical attacks in this phase, though he likes to go for the Kasha occasionally to dispel all your party's buffs. Since Ryuji's magic stat is so low, he's basically useless in this phase, so he acts as support, casting Matsuru Kasha or throwing items. Shido's Arm of Destruction attack especially is very nasty, since it can also rage a character, which will cause him to hit into his physical repel, so we definitely need to heal that quickly. Between trying to put up buffs and debuffs, as well as heal both HP and ailments when needed, we are actually having a lot of trouble getting damage in during this phase. Shido will even cast Makara at various points of the battle, which feels like it is just plain unfair, but I guess that's how enemies feel when I come charging with technical hits, so it's only leveling the playing field, I guess. After a while, Shido also starts charging for Arm of Destruction again, which is an almighty attack as I found out after seeing the damage with Shikyuji equipped. Luckily, Choka has more than enough HP to easily tank the hit, and we're finally able to transition into phase 2 soon after. Shido now resists all elements, but is neutral to physical damage, and this is our time to shine with big numbers. We equip the Will Seed Ring from Kanashiro's castle on Choka for Champions Cup, which not only heals a party member with a tier 2 healing spell, but also puts up an additional Tarokasha, which certainly comes in handy. Shido will now attack with various elemental spells, which causes him to hit a party member's weakness occasionally, but compared to phase 1, this is rather tame and we get him into his last phase rather quickly. In his final phase, he's neutral to everything and will mostly use cannon fire to attack the party. We continue on like before, doing damage with charged physical hits. Eventually, Shido will charge up himself for a big attack, but we're able to take him out before that happens, and transition into fight number 2. From now on, all Shido phases are neutral to all damage, so I expect this one to not be as tricky as the previous fight, but let's see for ourselves. Shido will now start to use Heat Riser regularly, so we throw baptismal waters at him to dispel it. Other than that, it's similar to before. Charge up and then go for damage on the enemy. Champions Cup still puts in heavy work and is probably the most useful thing in the entire battle, to the point where Choka now mainly plays the role of support, while Ryuji charges up and goes for damage with Megaton Raid. Shido will occasionally fear Ryuji with Bloodbath and then hit technical damage with Mopsiodyne, but as long as we got buffs and debuffs up, the incoming damage is not too bad. Tyrant's Purge does trigger his Endure though, so I expect him to go down sooner than later. Overall, this fight is rather manageable though, and after a while we get him down to transition into his final form. Since this is not counted as a separate battle, we get to keep the buffs and can continue on. Just like before, he will still spam Heat Riser, and we're getting to the point where we are running out of baptismal waters, so this could become an issue soon. On the offensive side, we continue on just like before as well, with Ryuji charging and using Megaton Raid, while Choka mainly acts as support. After Shido charges up, Ryuji goes down, but luckily we got enough Balm of Lives to bring him back and continue on like before. Mabufodine is probably the attack I'm most afraid of, since he could potentially freeze Choker and then bypass the physical immunity and wipe him, but luckily freeze doesn't seem to stick. Since we got no baptismal waters left, we need to throw debilitative Fudas or ultimate sprays to counteract the Heat Riser, but luckily it's only a few more attacks until Shido transitions into his final phase, where he will eject everybody, well, actually just Ryuji in this scenario, and make it a one-on-one with Choker. While he goes by a very strict pattern in his last phase, we mostly ignore this, put on Thor and start spamming Wild Thunder. With Shido buffing himself and debuffing Choker, we're barely doing any damage to the enemy, but we still have the Enduring Soul for a full heal, so I'm not really worried about that too much. We continue spamming Wild Thunder until Shido eventually goes down for good, and we're done with yet another palace. If it wasn't for that goddamn awful phase 1 of the very first battle, this would have been pretty manageable for the most part. But we got the victory in the first try, and that's pretty much all that matters. With that, we got the last bits of downtime until Christmas. We go through the last section of Mementos, though there is barely anything to talk about at this point since the bosses all easily go down to technical hits. Choka has also maxed out both his HP and SP at this point, so there is literally nothing useful to do any longer. The only thing we want to do is grab 3 new ultimate sprays once the new year rolls around, as well as make a trip to the church on every Sunday for the items. Otherwise, all we do is sleep and wait until Christmas arrives and we need to erase Mementos. Since all enemies in here can easily be obliterated with technical hits again, we skip forward to the point where we battle the Holy Grail for the first time. After we get ejected from the scripted battle, Mementos merges with the real world and we need to fight our way through the Archangels, starting with the first one, Uriel. Uriel starts the battle by summoning 2 angels which are weak to curse attacks, so we can use their weakness to build a baton pass and do big damage with Joker. It's literally only 2 turns and Archangel number 1 is already down again. Archangel number 2 is Raphael, who exclusively uses physical attacks, so once again we are invincible with Shikiuchi equipped. Ryuji has also learned God's Hand in the meantime, so once again we use charge and physical attacks. Raphael does manage to get a crit on Ryuji and wipe him, but this is still no issue, and after bringing him back, we get the enemy down without further issues. Up next is Gabriel, who only uses magical attacks, and this one could be a little tricky considering it can hit party members' weaknesses. Divine Judgment can be annoying as well since it halves a character's HP, and Mabufudine can also freeze party members, but other than that, we again have very little issues and are able to finish off the enemies soon after. The last Archangel coming up is Michael, who just like Uriel earlier, starts the battle by summoning 2 angels. Like before, we can use the Angel's Curse weakness to our advantage in order to build a baton pass and are able to get a lucky crit with Ryuji's God Hand. While Michael manages to freeze Joker with Mabufudine, we can heal it before worse things happen, and a few more attacks later, the last Archangel is down as well, and we're now ready to head into the big fight against the Holy Grail. And while the Holy Grail rebattle is usually rather easy, in a 2-man setting, we actually have to take things carefully. Ryuji is sent to cut the cables, and Joker's charged triple downs in the meantime deal damage to the boss. When the Grail uses Gathering Light, we guard with both party members, and with no buffs and debuffs up, the party actually takes quite some damage. Luckily we still have a few Wine of Grace to fully heal the party, and after putting up buffs and debuffs, we continue doing damage until the Grail is down. With that, we transition into the Yaldabaoth battle. The strategy remains the same though. We try to put up buffs and debuffs, charge up, and then go to work. Considering we only have 2 party members available, going full buffs and debuffs is not really an option, so we usually only use the most important ones in Taronda and Marakukaja. The early parts of the battle are not really a big issue for the most part. It doesn't become dangerous until the boss starts to summon the first couple of adds. This is where triple down comes in really handy. With the exception of the sword, all of Yaldabaoth's parts are neutral to gun damage. Yes, even the gun part. So we can use triple down to somewhat mitigate the incoming damage by beating the adds regularly. Since the sword repels both physical and gun attacks though, we can't use Agniastra on Ryuji since the repelled damage would most likely wipe him, so he usually focuses on Yaldabaoth himself with God's Hand. I was also pretty sure that I had spray items for AoE attack debuffs, but as it seems we only got the ones for defense and evasion, not for attack though, which is a problem because those could have greatly reduced the incoming damage the party takes. Looking at it now, the weakness spray which comes with the Mataronda effect could be obtained via fishing, so in hindsight, I should have spent the time at the fishing pond to grind a couple of those instead of sleeping through the last month. Then again, Yaldabaoth also likes to use the Conda to negate debuffs, so I'm not all too sure how useful those would have been anyways. Ryuji eventually gets his Endure triggered, and with the amount of adds growing every turn, it's only a matter of time before he goes down. While we still have a good amount of revives and full party heals available, this is starting to become rather tricky, with the party sometimes having to take up to 5 hits in a single turn. Luckily, we already got some good damage in on Yaldabaoth, so after a few more attacks, he already starts charging up for his big attack. And here is where I made a fatal mistake. I was pretty sure that you can lower the attack's damage by taking out several of Yaldabaoth's parts, and looking it up now, this is also what the wiki says, but I'm not sure I want to believe that, seeing as Ryuji took over 1000 damage on the Race of Control, so if Joker hadn't dodged that attack, we would have had a major issue. Luckily, Yaldabaoth is pretty much down at this point, so it's only a couple of more attacks until we win the battle, and save the world on Christmas Eve, after very fittingly putting a huge bullet through Yaldabaoth's head. And while we still managed to beat the boss in our very first attempt, this was definitely by far the most difficult battle so far. I can already see having huge issues with other Arcanas here, so this will definitely become an interesting roadblock for future runs. Anyways, we spent Christmas with Sojiro and Futaba since we got no waifu here, which is also a first time for me. I actually had to fully watch the cutscenes since it was my first playthrough without any romance at this point, and I gotta admit, the scene is pretty wholesome and definitely makes not having a romance option appealing. Once the new year hits, things start to get weird again, and we enter the final palace a couple of days later, now with Kasumi and Akechi on our side, so this is basically a solo Choka segment for now. And while regular battles are still no issue, the battle against Hastur becomes kinda tricky. The enemy regularly putting fear on Choka makes this quite annoying, and with only a single party member available, our options when it comes to buffs and debuffs are also very limited to say the least. Luckily we picked up the heal charm on the way, which gives Choka the ability to cast the Arahan to fully heal himself. With that and triple down, we slowly whittle away at the boss's HP until it heals itself as well. Now I was rather curious to what would happen here now considering Akechi was down, but the game just auto-revived him and triggers the cutscene nonetheless, so we have to use the scripted showtime here to finish the battle off. After returning to the real world and talking to all party members, we return to the palace a few days later and now have to battle Sumire first. Again with Shikiuchi this is free, since she only uses physical attacks, and once the scripted part of the boss battle is over, the rest of the party rejoins, so we are back to our usual setup. We start off the battle with an unlucky crit against Joker, and once he's back up, we start going to work on the enemies. The Byakis are weak to nuke damage, so we hit the weakness in order to build up a baton pass and then deal increased damage with both characters. With that, the battle becomes relatively easy, and it's only a couple of turns until Cendrillon is down and Sumire is rescued. She decides to join the party, and we officially kick off the very last dungeon of the game. Part 1 of the palace is not special for the most part. We get the Orichalcum, which is the final treasure demon of the run, and use it to build a new Thor with it, since we can inherit several tier 4 elemental spells from it, which might come in very handy for the final boss fight later on. The first somewhat mini-boss battle against Dionysus and Chimera is quickly over after shocking Chimera and also almost one-shotting Dionysus even without a status ailment. Once we refused our Thor with the new skills, we continue on in the dungeon until we run into the final battle of part 1 against our favorite two personas, which names I still cannot pronounce even after 3 years of doing challenge runs of this game. The strategy though is still the same regardless. We charge up, try to get status elements on, and then unleash the full power of triple down. Since enemy number 2 is resisting all kinds of physical skills, we throw a freeze spray to be able to bypass it and finish the battle on the following turn with another triple down. With that, we are done with part 1 of the palace and have to head into Mementos for the final time now. Before we do that though, we get the third awakening on Ryuji. While his ultimate skill will not be used due to the amount of SP it takes, his persona trait gets upgraded from a 40% to an 80% physical boost, so that is definitely useful. The final Mementos segment is also rather uneventful. We can insta-kill the majority of enemies thanks to our high level, and the last couple of requests are not really worth mentioning either, as they don't really pose any threat to our two-man army. Once we reach the top, we return to the real world and head back to the palace on the following day. The first mini-boss fight here is against Surt, and while he resists and gnaws all kinds of things, we can freeze him, so all of that is for naught. We work with our usual gun technical hit combination, and Surt is gone after just 2 attacks and a freeze spray to finish things off. The Willseed Gatekeeper is just a regular Fafnir that we have fought several times throughout the dungeon already, so just like before, it's freeze, triple down and finished. The final mini-boss of the game is Siegfried, who gnaws physical and resists guns. And while we can shock him, triple down doesn't do a whole lot of damage, so eventually I decided to switch over to Thor's Atomic Flare, since nuke attacks also trigger technical hits on shocked enemies. While the battle takes a couple of turns, we were never in any danger and are successfully able to beat the enemy and clear our way to the final boss of the game. Back in the real world, we still have a few days to spare, but considering that we are literally done with everything, we mostly just go to sleep to pass the time. Once February hits, we buy one last set of ultimate sprays and then get ready to head back into the palace for the final boss fight of the game. Now, as most of you already know, the key to this boss fight is to get rid of the tentacles in order to deal big damage to Azathoth. The plan here is to use Thor in order to get rid of the tentacles with our tier 4 elemental spells, and then pass the baton over to Ryuji for a charged God's Hand. After debuffing Azathoth, we start throwing cleaning sprays for an AoE defense debuff. With barely any passive elemental boosts and amps, I am pretty sure we won't be able to one-shot the tentacles, so the extra defense debuff definitely comes in handy here. During setup turns, we make sure to keep the party buffed and the enemy debuffed, and once we are ready to unleash the damage, we kill off the majority of tentacles and have Ryuji deal huge damage to the boss itself. With this, we can get through phase 1 rather easily, and once we transition into phase 2, the battle becomes a lot trickier. Maruki will now regularly forbid certain actions during the party's turn, such as no magic, no baton passing, or no healing. Not only that, but he also loves to start spamming Evil Smile to potentially fear both party members. Other than that, it's pretty similar to phase 1. Actually unleashing the damage becomes a bit more complicated now due to potential status ailments and forbidden actions, so oftentimes we need to stall until we can go for actual damage turns. The good thing though is that Maruki in phase 2 only uses physical and blast damage for his regular attacks, both of which Shikiuchi once again nulls, so the majority of damage will not affect Joker at all. When the boss decides to charge up, we make sure to guard with at least Ryuji. Joker has enough max HP to easily take the hit, but we want to try and keep Ryuji's Endure up for as long as somewhat possible. Another problem with Maruki's attacks is that Eternal Radiance can cause Dizzy, which makes Raining Seeds hit technical damage on the party, and this eventually triggers Ryuji's Endure, so yeah, so much for that. Luckily, we have more than enough revival and full healing items, so we should still be good for the most part. Overall, our strategy is very solid, and the God's Hand on a fully exposed Azathoth deals huge damage, so it's all looking good, until Maruki starts charging up again, and then also decides to forbid healing. Joker is down to 430 HP at this point, and without healing this could become tricky, so I decided to guard and hope he can tank it. We still have the Enduring Soul on Joker for emergency cases, but that wasn't even needed as the charged attack only deals a bit more than 200 damage. A few turns later, we hit the 2 final hits on Maruki and are able to transition into phase 3 of the fight, where we now only go against Maruki himself. Azathoth is still the one doing the damage, but unfortunately cannot be targeted, so the only way to mitigate the incoming damage is by buffing our defense. As you might have noticed, the game also forced 2 more party members into our setup again, so just like before, we guard with everybody that is not Joker or Ryuji. The strategy in terms of dealing damage remains the same though. We charge with both of them, and then hit hard with God's Hand and triple down. Revitalized Soul triggers Ryuji's Endure, and Azathoth starts dealing huge single target damage with Grand Palm now. Joker luckily dodges the first one, but the second one triggers his Enduring Soul, even though he still had 860 HP left. Joker again gets targeted on the following turn, but is able to barely take the next hit with 18 HP remaining, so we need to have Joker at full HP at all times now. There is still the emergency protect from Ryuji, but I'd rather not give up my last line of defense unless absolutely necessary. Luckily Maruki at this point is almost done already, so after reapplying all buffs, we throw out one last God's Hand and end phase 3, which effectively means that we have completed this challenge. Maruki's last phase is scripted, and once we bonk him on the head with our gun, we are officially done. And while we watch the final fist fight and the following cutscenes, let's quickly revisit everything that went down in the run before we give out the final ranking. The Chariot Arcana is for sure one of the strongest of the entire game. Shikiuchi is one of the most broken personas thanks to its elemental affinities and early access, and Triple Down combined with Gun Boost and Gun Amp from White Rider made the majority of this challenge a cakewalk. There are a few negatives to mention here, such as the lack of useful healing spells, no access to either Tetrakarn or Morkarkarn, or the fact that the entire Chariot line of personas is generally very physical based. If it wasn't for treasure demons, we barely would have had access to any useful elemental magic, so that is definitely something to keep in mind for sure. Still, even with all that being said, I would easily rank the Chariot Arcana in S tier. Obviously, this is only the first run, so some of the rankings might change over time depending on how other Arcanas perform, but I'll be honest and say that I'm 99% sure that the Chariot will be the top Arcana when it's all said and done, and therefore pulling out the S tier is only justified. The combination of the insta-kill confidant skill, access to the gym, and incredibly useful gun skills combined with technical damage is just absolutely nuts, so I would be very surprised if there was any other Arcana that could outperform the Chariot. With that, we got the first Arcana down, but there are still 22 more to go. And like mentioned in the intro, I will let you guys decide on which Arcana I'm going for next, so feel free to leave your suggestion in the comments. With that being said, special thanks go out to this video's top supporters Norel, Laura Nemeth and Shirker, as well as all other channel members and patrons. Becoming a channel member or joining the Patreon gives you 48-hour early access to all videos among small other perks, so if you want to support the channel even more, there are plenty of ways to do so. That is it for me today. I hope you enjoyed the run as much as I did, and I hope to see you all in the next Persona 5 Royal Arcana Challenge video as well. Until then, take care.